Welcome to episode 18 of the Imagine Your Future podcast. You'll notice we've had a short break since our last episode. Barry Mathews has decided to move on from ISG to focus on a very new and exciting adventure in the open talent space. More on that shortly. I'm Steve Hall, and I'm going to host the next several episodes before being joined by my co-host and colleague, Karen Collier. I'm not new to the podcast, as I co-hosted the very first episode with Barry back in April 2019 and made several guest appearances over the last year. It's great to be hosting, though, and giving my own spin to the world of technology. I'm an avid techie and have been working in technology for over 30 years. I've been with ISG for 15 years, and during that time have supported some of the largest enterprises in the world on their digital journeys. Within ISG, I've led our applications business, manufacturing, media, and communications business, and our ANZ business. In 2018, the board asked me to move to Europe to lead our European business. This was a big move for my wife and I and our 120-pound English Mastiff German Shepherd mix. But we packed our suitcases and launched a grand adventure. We now live in the beautiful Surrey Hills of Southeast England. I'm the president of our European business and lead our global digital solutions. I also can't get away from tech, though, so I also have the honor of leading ISG's technology teams as we expand our own internal digital platform offerings. Our aim with this podcast is to inform, educate, and engage our listeners on all topics technology and digital related. We have a great lineup of senior executives and thought leaders from various industries scheduled throughout the year. So please subscribe and stay tuned on LinkedIn or other social channels as we continue to expand this podcast. In this episode, we'll be talking about one of the hottest topics in the market, open talent and the gig economy. I'm delighted to say that my guest today is Barry Mathews himself. Barry, I know the audience knows you well, but please introduce yourself to our new listeners.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to be back. I don't think either of us thought when we kicked this off, whatever 18 months ago, that I would be a guest on the new format of the podcast. So no, it's great to be here. So I'm Barry Mathews. As you said, I used to run the Northern European part of the business, working for you, and had a great time at ISG. I was just thinking, how long was I there for? Through acquisition, around 10 years, but actually about four years when ISG acquired the business I was running before Allsbridge. Yeah. Great time. Loved my time at ISG, but decided it was time for me to do something slightly different. And I saw this opportunity for what the industry really calls open talent, which is, as you say, sort of around gig work and the freelance economy. And I was really inspired going back to 2016, and it was really meeting Mike Morris and the guys at Topcoder when Wipro acquired Aperio, which owned Topcoder. And I was introduced to this whole new world that I'd never really thought about before. And over time, I'd seen that expand and grow. And so earlier this year, I thought long and hard about what the opportunities might be for platform-based business models for accessing talent to really disrupt the world of work. And I figured it's going to be very, very disruptive. And so therefore, I decided to set up a business called Resource, which is helping enterprises to access the gig economy or open talent models at scale.
So give us a sense. I mean, I think many of us know the gig economy and open talent when we think about Uber, when we think about Lyft, and the changes in the platform opportunities that have gone there. And certainly freelancers have been available for a lot of years on design and marketing and even coding. What do you see as the big difference? And really, what's the new way and the big fuss about moving to open talent?
Yeah. So freelancing has been around for hundreds of years. In fact, the term dates back to when we used lances on horses. And when they're, in jousting matches. And so it's really been around since the Middle Ages or whenever that was. My history is not very good. And of course, we've all been using freelancers physically, 1099s, associates, contractors, whatever you want to call them, for forever. But what's really changed now is that platforms have enabled enterprises to access talent, which is distributed globally, which is remote. So we're suddenly realizing, and COVID has had a big impact on this over the last 6 months, that if we want to access talent, it doesn't have to be physically, geographically located next to where we work. It doesn't have to come into the office. So if we want to access talent, we can do so by a platform, and that talent might be on the other side of the world. But because it's controlled via a digital platform, whatever the resource does for us is monitored by the platform. The platform quite often is liable for the quality of the work, the timeliness of the work, and the cost of the work. Suddenly, you've got access to this global talent pool. There are 70 million freelance resources in the world right now working, and so it's not just Uber and Lyft and Airbnb and all of the other things we associate with gig work, but it's graphic design, user experience, computer science, AI, software development, testing, business process outsourcing functions that are in global business services and shared services models. So suddenly there's this realization that there's access to a huge talent pool at very competitive prices through digital platforms, secure, with IP managed successfully. And it's not necessarily new. These platforms have been around for quite a while. Topcoder that I mentioned has been around for about 20 years. But for a variety of reasons, COVID being one of them, they've suddenly become much, much more mainstream and more mature, and they're starting to have a disruptive impact on business.
Very interesting. Before we get into the technologies, which I really want to talk through, give me your sense of the regulatory changes that are occurring. I mean, as we saw last week, California passed a new law essentially saying that Uber drivers had to be employed by Uber, which means that you're probably going to see a lot of the people that have been successful in the gig economy in California and other states really moving out, and Uber probably not doing that because they're a platform company. That's what they do. How do you see the regulatory environment sort of shaping up even before the technology gets there?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that the technology's there, but the regulatory environment needs to catch up. If, as is predicted, that half the working population in the world will be freelance in 5 years' time, which is a Gartner statistic, that's crazy when you think about it, right? Because the regulatory environment is so far behind that model. In the UK, it's hard to get a mortgage if you're a freelance worker. I know of people who've changed from freelance to go full-time employed to apply for the mortgage, and then they've resigned and gone back to the freelance working world once they've got the mortgage approved. We're sort of lagging behind. So I think regulations, tax incentives will change in time to start to look after freelance workers more. Obviously, in the UK, we've got IR35 coming in, and platforms actually help with IR35. They're designed for short-term gigs, not for FTE replacement. But there's an awful lot of work to do, Steve, for society, I think, to address gig work, because I think there's a really good side to gig or freelance or open talent work, in that it provides access to a diverse range of skills. If you're getting access to somebody, you don't care where they're based, you don't care about their religion, their race, their sexuality, even their academic qualifications, because you're paying for an outcome. And I think that's great, and that can be really good. And there's some brilliant stories of working mothers with several kids who are able to make a great living in the gig economy by providing services to enterprises, or people who've got 2 or 3 jobs and they're able to really make a significant amount of money using open talent models. But for every one of those, there are also lots, probably hundreds or thousands, who are at the other end of the gig economy scale, and they're not making as much money, if any money. And they're not protected. They don't have pensions and healthcare and rights from an employment perspective. And I think society's got to catch up to make sure that gig workers, freelance workers, are protected.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. The good thing is it does provide so much flexibility for people as they go forward, and it does kind of create a new sense of capitalism, if you will, in that you can do a lot of different things and choose your own hours, choose your own, work, but, benefits and other things that people have traditionally relied on from an employer, you're going to have to rethink those types of capabilities as you go through.
Yeah.
The other thing that really strikes me about the platform, especially as the more and more I talk to you on it, Barry, is really sort of the whole growth of different types of platforms. So, I think there's the platforms that allow you to go out and get individual talent. There's certainly the platforms like Deliveroo and Uber and others that, I think you call it freelance anything. And then certainly the broader platform strategies that really take ideas and ideation and creation of new ideas. Can you walk through those?
Yeah, sure. Because it is quite complex, and people try and think that all platforms are doing the same thing, and they're absolutely not. And by the way, there are about 300 different talent platforms in this world. Matching supply and demand of talent, putting enterprises in touch with workers able to deliver a service. So it's a pretty complex area. We're actually doing research on the top platforms so that we can have actually really robust information to provide to our clients. But yeah, if you think about it, as you said, in sort of three areas is the way I look at it. There are sort of straightforward, gig platforms where you let's say in an enterprise context, you're an enterprise and you need some help, and that might be a software developer, you might need a graphic designer, you might need someone to look at an API development, or it might be some invoice processing, or it might be a project manager. You can go to a gig platform, any platform, and you can sign up and get matched with a resource. Now that typically might be physically in the old sort of pre-COVID world, they'd come into your office, or it can be, of course, now and increasingly so, remote. You'll know the person's name potentially when you contract them. You don't necessarily have to, and you'll instant message with them and probably do video calls. And whether you get them from a Upwork or a freelancer.com or a guru.com, there are, as I say, there are so many of those. The second way of thinking about it then is if you've got you want a team of experts. Or you want some real high-end expertise, and you want the platform to do some of the work for you, take liability for it, potentially front up a project of, a number of data scientists or a number of AI experts. And there you've got platforms which will manage that whole process. Platforms like a Catalent or a Talent Alpha or a TopTal, or they're even, you can get experts from business talent group, or you can get consultants from Helper Street. There are so many of them, but that's more of a sort of, I suppose, a comprehensive, and I don't want to say the word professional, but more of a robust service. And then you've got crowd platforms where you have as an enterprise, you want an idea. You might be wanting to design the next water bottle that I've got in front of me, and you want some ideas, and you can link in your supply chain, your suppliers and your customers, and get them to submit ideas by through platforms like Wazoku or Innocentive. In fact, Wazoku have just bought Innocentive, or IDEO, and there's lots of other of these ideation and innovation platforms which can just have some fantastic results. Or there's platforms like a 99 Designs, where you like, I wanted a logo for my new business. I went on to 99 Designs and I got 33 logos back, and I chose which one I wanted. And within a week, I had a logo. Or the Top Coder, as I mentioned, where their modus operandi, what they've been specializing in for almost 20 years, is helping enterprises solve problems by accessing what is now, I think, about 1.5 million members of their community. And the enterprise will say, I've got an application in one version of code. I want to put it into another version of code. And Top Coder will help them by providing what they call a co-pilot, like a project manager. And then members of the community will say, oh, yeah, well, I know that version of code. I'll submit a response, almost like watching a sort of an eBay sort of model. And a number of them will take part in a competition, and it's gamification. They absolutely love it. And the winners, typically first, second, and third place, get prize money, but they're basically providing a solution in a competitive, gamified way. And that those crowdsourcing models, where you're looking outside of the four walls of your organization, can be brilliant for getting new ideas, new thinking, and solutions done very, very competitively, and very, very quickly as well.
Yeah, fascinating. That's one of the key things that I've seen on the gig economy as well, and just open talent and open platforms as well, is how quickly you can get things done, but how competitive it is. Even when I think about, so many of the projects that people have done with open source, a lot of that is just pride in the work, everything else that you're doing. So you're tapping into a different a different incentive model here as well as you go forward.
Yeah, I think open source software, it's a very, very similar model, right? And it's exactly the way I sort of think about it in my head. Before the days of open source where everything was prepackaged, and then, the pioneers sort of opened it up and you could sort of share and you could crowdsource solutions. It's very, very similar to the construct metaphor. If you think about from a talent perspective, it's exactly the same. We used to think in sort of, in lines and squares, and you employed people, or you had physical contractors, or you outsourced stuff, and that was the way it was. And now you've got to take an open mindset to accessing talent. If you take a step back, we're just saying, we want to get a piece of work done as an enterprise, and we want to be matched with the best possible people to get it done. And those ideas can come from anywhere if you take an open mindset and a sort of crowdsourced mindset with people working together for your enterprise from around the world, the best minds. And I think that sort of software, methodology or way of thinking can be applied exactly to talent.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you just think about the environment you and I grew up in with outsourcing, clearly 10 years ago, open source was always something that you would put in the MSAs or something and restrict the use of open source. Now it's almost the complete opposite on why wouldn't you use open source? What is your plan to make it more open and be more standards based as you do it? And I think you're onto something with talent being the same place. And I think enterprises are going to be open to it.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. I'm sort of fascinated, though, if I think about the exec of the future, what that means. So you were a highly successful executive, managing directors. We talked through doing really, really well. And I'm sure there's a lot of other execs in your position that are looking at open talent and thinking through, but what does my career look like as you go forward? And what does a modern exec look like in a open talent world?
Yeah, and I think the majority of executives will still be fully employed. This is my model, and I may be wrong. Who knows what the future will look like? But then the layers below exec will be more likely to be freelance. But having said that, people making decisions like I've made, wanting to take more individual control of their careers, wanting to just choose, where they focus and which areas they work in. And there are a lot of platforms which support exactly that, which focus on executives who've had, C-level roles and finding them what they call fractional work. If you think about it from an enterprise, you don't always need a full-time resource to lead something for you. You might need them for 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And so much like my partner in life, Eleanor, who's got 3 or 4 things that she does, 2 days here, 3 days there, 1 day there. I know so many people in those senior positions who are now having a portfolio lifestyle. So I do think the sort of leaders of the future, those of us who sort of feel entrepreneurial or creative and have new ideas all the time, won't necessarily always decide to stay in that, one firm as we did in the past. And they will split their time across different enterprises and try different things. And if you think, you think how millennials coming are already in the workforce, but now taking leadership roles, and the fact that we have everything on demand as consumers, and we can change our mind, and, convenience trumps loyalty in a digital world. And it's the same as when we think about talent and careers, as millennials will have multiple careers in their lifetime. They can retrain themselves really quickly. The freelance workforce retrain themselves much more than the employed workforce, which I found quite surprising, but it's absolutely true. So they take many more personal development and professional development courses than employees, even though an employer pays for the training. Typically, it's really interesting to see. So they take more responsibility for their own personal and professional development. They're more likely, therefore, to be a software developer for a couple of years, and then they'll go into data science for a couple of years, and then they'll think, wow, RPA and AI are the future. They'll go into that and train themselves. So I think we'll see much more chopping and changing, and career paths not being a straight line, but being, sort of going off at a tributary and then coming back again, and sort of having much more of a circuitous path. And I think that's interesting. And digital platforms will enable that because you've got the choice, you've got the flexibility. You can take control of what you want to do, knowing that there will be, if you're good, of course, because it'll be sort of quality control and survival of the fittest. But if you're good through digital platforms, you will be able to be matched with demand coming from enterprises to enable you to have that flexibility.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I just think about all the different platforms that you have to even change your careers now and enhance your careers, whether it's LinkedIn Learning or Coursera and the whole line of, education improvement and self-improvement platforms. They're all really sort of convalescing together to think about a new person and how we kind of start our work, how we start our careers and how we progress through our careers. It's fascinating. And I think it's going to change, as you said, how execs think, but even how organizations are going to be formed. I mean, I can imagine an organization, that, 100 million of revenue and maybe 10 people. And it's not just platform play. It's how they pull in the resources and everything else as they go forward. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you. Accenture was saying this a while ago, and they were calling it a liquid workforce. And their prediction was that you will have, Fortune 500 organizations potentially with no employees. Whether we'll get there or not, I don't know. But I can absolutely see, and in fact, I know of some now that are competing with some of the service providers that have very, very few employees. They have a sort of service catalog automated model, and then they have thousands of distributed workers who are freelance, who don't work for them fully. But they understand their methodology, and they don't want to be employed. So I think we will absolutely see, shop windows of brands, and we won't care necessarily as enterprises or consumers whether somebody who's doing the work for us is employed or not. Why would we care? As long as they are good, and we can see from a digital platform how many stars they've got, what reviews they've got, what customer feedback they've got, and as long as the brand, the shop window can guarantee price, quality, and time, those three classic variables that you've got to be able to manage, then we won't care. So this is why I think employment models and also outsourcing models are going to be shaken up so much, because there is such scale, infinite scale, almost into the billions, right, of the world's population. If they decide to use platforms, enterprises can be put in touch with the right talent at the right time at the click of a button. They won't need to go into long-term managed services deals. They won't need to employ people full time and pay pension and healthcare and all of those benefits. Now, that's a long way off, obviously, but it might be 10 years off. But I think it's really going to shake up both outsourcing as well as contingent labor models, as well as employment and physical contracting models. So there's huge change on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. And clearly with the elections coming up next week, which are top of mind for a lot of people, I think the U.S. elections are November 3rd. So next Tuesday from when we're recording this. If you think of the political ramifications of these types of models, you're clearly going to have to rethink through the whole employer-employee relationship and what that means, and tax consequences and everything through. But we talked through this through automation and other major transformations seem to come out further ahead. So which is a good thing as you think about how technology adopts. One of the things that interests me as well, though, when you talk about it, when you think about resource and your new company, give me a sense of who you're going to sell to and how you envision your firm coming together over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, sure, no problem. The beauty, if you like, this a bit like RPA. The beauty of it is it's very simple, and the same with open talent. The concept is very simple, but making it work at scale in a big, complex enterprise requires the classic consulting services. It requires, executive support. It requires a communication plan. It requires change management. It requires process change. It requires technology change. And it requires operating change. So all of those consulting wrappers, that's what Resource are doing. So helping enterprises to really understand the on-demand talent, the open talent, the platform sourcing world at scale, And so part of that's, which platform should we use and how do they work? Part of that is, business case and scenario modeling. Part of that will be end up re-looking at sourcing strategies, because organizations will think, well, do I really need to spend X million with this service provider if I could use a platform instead? And then the other side of it, Steve, is working with the service providers themselves. So, the large scale tier 1 and tier 2 service providers that we know so well are also all looking at this model, of course, because they employ hundreds of thousands of full-time employees, and they're being impacted by this change and this move to open talent. And they're realizing that they could build their own platform or buy a platform as Wipro did with Topcoder, or white label an existing platform. And suddenly they've got access to thousands of additional FTEs they don't have to employ. Or they could, as Deloitte have done brilliantly with Expify, they could do a strategic, formal relationship. And Expify came out of Harvard. They got 30,000 AI experts, arguably the best, AI experts in the world. And Deloitte have got access, I think, to the top 10% through a strategic relationship. So Deloitte can then sell that into their customers and be very open about the fact that they're Expify platform users rather than employees. So I think that was something that we will see change. We'll be proud to work in the open talent world as opposed to sort of hiding the fact that we use freelancers. So Resource will be working on both sides, but with enterprises and with service providers. I'm also going to be embracing the open talent model with our consulting. So I'm connected now with a large number of freelancers, associates, people who work in the freelance and open talent economy, who are experts in future of work planning, in operating models in the open talent economy, and business cases in the open talent economy. Some of them are from academia, some of them are from the progressive organizations that have already done this, some of them are from other consultancies. So we'll come together. I'll have a sort of a core of employees, and then we'll have a network of open talent experts from around the world to deliver services, and be really proud of that. I may even end up having my own platform to link up the consultants on one side with our clients on the other. But I definitely won't build a platform. I'll white label from one of the 300 that already exist.
Absolutely brilliant, Barry. I think you're going to drink your own champagne then, it sounds like.
Exactly.
And as I sort of see the whole platform economy rise up, I can see you being a key player as we go forward with this. So absolutely so excited to hear about what you're doing. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all your energy as always. And any final words?
Well, thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure talking. It was a pleasure working with you. I'm sure we'll continue to work together. But no, I'd say watch this space. I think it's super exciting, super interesting, and it's moving so incredibly quickly. It seems that every browser window I open now has got something on open talent or the gig economy. So it really is moving very fast. But let's check back in a year or so, and I'll give you an update as to how this whole world has changed.
Well, I have a feeling we'll be checking in much more than a year or so. So I'm looking forward to it, Barry. Thank you again, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you, Steve.